everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland Watchlist here on the SPM Crew Podcasting Network. And this is my weekly show where I have a guest and we play some movie roulette and randomly select a movie off my enormous watch list, which basically could be anything. And joining me for this episode is my frequent collaborator friend, Luke. Thank you so much for coming on.
Always a blast. You know what else is enormous?
What?
Yakuza's present in Japan.
There you go. I did not know where you're going with that, but
The moment you said enormous, I'm like, all right, let me do something with that.
well, and that is indeed what we're going to be talking about is now Yakuza.
Mhm.
And this film was released December 28th, 1974 in Japan and got a US release a few months later, March 19th, 1975. This is a 112-minute film, just under 2 hours. Its
Mhm.
box office was $1.5 million off of a $5 million budget. This did
Oof.
not do very well.
Nope.
Directed by Sidney Pollack, starring Robert Mitchum
Mhm.
of, many of noir films and such, and Ken Takakura. This was indeed written by Paul Schrader and Robert Towne, but not together, and we'll get into that in a minute. This was a co-production between Warner Bros. And Toei Company in Japan, so this was a collaboration specifically between the United States and Japan. It had it has mixed reviews. It received mixed reviews from critics upon release, but there's a group of directors that have really championed this film, and who's surprised? One of them is Quentin Tarantino.
Of course.
Uh, 'Cause I'm not surprised. So Schrader came up with this idea based off of letters from his brother who was living in Japan and kind of materialized into this story. Um, Schrader was actually influenced by Ken Takakura's films that he started featuring the Yakuza and watched a bunch of their films over a 2 month period trying to get the creative juices going to write the screenplay. Robert Aldrich wanted to direct the film, but specifically, they really did not like how Schrader treated the protagonist. He
Mm.
was too morally gray that they didn't want to like make that character, which is very interesting, which also like of course he was. It's a Paul Schrader movie.
Yeah.
So you get what you get. But Aldrich made some changes and wanted to cast Lee Marvin
Mm.
in the film, but that did not work out. Aldrich brought Mitchum on because he had previously worked with Mitchum and thought they had a great relationship. Spoiler alert, Robert Mitchum hated Aldrich
Ooh.
and did not want to work with him. And when he got brought onto the film, got Aldrich kicked off the film.
Mhm.
So instant karma. Aldrich is like, I'm going to bring on Robert Mitchum onto this film. Robert Mitchum's like, get the hell out of here. Um, I know you brought up Scorsese wanted to direct this film, which
Mhm.
I could definitely see that for sure. But Pollock came on and brought in Robert Towne to soften up the screenplay.
Mhm.
So it was Robert Towne who made Mitchum's character a lot more on like the good side and less morally gray in this situation. Robert Redford was interested in starring in the film, but was considered not old enough to fit into the story, which at that point in time is true.
Yeah.
Like it's the early 70s at that point. And Pollock had to overcome cultural barriers and language barriers in his approach to actually filming the film because he had a mostly Japanese crew
Mhm.
working on the film. So there was some issues trying to put this all together. But I know you did a little bit of digging, Luke. Was there anything else interesting that I didn't mention that you saw?
There was about that language issue that. Oh yeah, here it is. So, as you mentioned, Cinepolak spoke no Japanese, and his cinematographer for Japan for most of Japan was Kozo Okazaki, who also spoke no English. And he apparently said, so Cinepolak said, we communicated in a very strange but effective way. They each had a grayscale card going from white to black in 10 stages, and they used that to communicate light density in various areas of a shot. And Sidney just says he did a lovely job. So this is from IMDb, which this movie looks great. I'll say that.
Yeah. And this is a really well shot,
Mm-hmm.
striking film
Yes.
for
Yeah.
sure. And we'll just give a quick synopsis real quick and then dive in. But an American private eye, Harry Kilmer, returns to Japan to rescue a friend's kidnapped daughter from the clutches of the Yakuza.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Quick side note, because this just popped in my head.
Tell me.
There's a little bit of Lethal Weapon in this. Like
Hmm.
specifically like reading that plot, how
Mm-hmm.
they're brought onto a case because an old friend's daughter gets caught up
Oh yeah.
because of the shadiness of the
Hmm.
father. And I'm like,
Hmm.
wait a minute. But that's just a quick side thing that I thought just popped in my head. But Luke, what were your general thoughts on the Yakuza?
So as I alluded to before, the movie is beautiful. Like it's shot beautifully. I because of my this morning when I watched the movie, I don't think I was in a state of mind to actually fully comprehend everything. So I thought or maybe the movie is a bit more complex than I think it needed to be. So I sometimes like, wait, who is this person again? Wait, what's the relation to this story again?
Mhm.
But, and I'll say but I still would rate it very positively. The only proper downside I would say is Sidney Pollack is a great director.
Mm.
I don't think he's a great action director. There are some sequences with guns and katanas and action happening, and quite a few of them are just very choppy and like, oh, what, where are we now? What is? Oh, we are here. Okay, okay, okay. And that would be my only proper negative that wasn't related to what I've been through this morning was the action. I thought was a bit messy, but other than that, I was pleasantly surprised how this movie, it's not the stereotypical foreigner comes to Japan and teaches them their ways. Like how respectful of Japanese culture and like actually interested in Japanese culture this movie is, and
Mhm.
wants to actually explain many different customs. I really thought that was for a movie from 1974, that was a pleasant surprise because this could have, especially Paul Schrader, as you mentioned, this could
Yeah.
have gone slightly worse. This could have been much worse. But what about
Well,
you? How did you
it
like the
could have
change?
been You Only Live Twice,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
that James Bond movie's never going to be praised for its cultural competency and equal respect that it shows,
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
Sean Connery and Yellowface. But
But
like this film, you brought up a very interesting point because one, I'm a huge
mm-hmm.
action movie fan, and I am in particular, I would say an action snob.
Okay.
Like I'm very critical
Mm-hmm.
of action in movies.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've been spoiled. Like, why should I
Yes.
put up with, Taken 3, where there's 15 shots of Liam Neeson hopping a fence,
Oh yeah.
when we have Mission Impossible and John Wick,
Yeah. Yeah.
or anything John McTiernan directed, like
Mm-hmm.
Predator or Die
Mm-hmm.
Hard?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're in a world where there's great action. And I do really like Sidney Pollack a lot. I actually really enjoy him as an actor too. But like
Same.
as a director, like I love The Firm. Big
Mm-hmm.
fan of The Firm.
Oh yeah.
And this film, it's interesting because when it focuses less on editing,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yep.
action is really good
Yes.
because it's really well framed. The cinematography is great.
Stunning.
And like I have IMDb up as always.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like cutting through a couple of shots, and there's like this overhead shot because we're gonna start towards the end here. Because this all builds up to this climactic
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sequence of it's basically like a go for broke suicide mission
Yeah.
between with Robert Mitchum's character and Takakura's character teaming up to go take down the Yakuza. And there's this overhead shot that's
Mm-hmm.
like perfectly framed, and you see the actual choreography going on. When there's less edits, this action really works because it's well choreographed and everything, and the cinematography is well done well. But
Mm-hmm.
there are moments where I think Pollock's trying to make this feel too like too going to try to make it too visceral by like edit, 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 edit. And it's
Yes.
just
Yeah.
like it kind of takes away from it
Mm-hmm.
because you do lose some of the you lose your place.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest sin of action. If you over edit something and you lose the physical logic of the space,
Yeah.
you lose the action. It's bad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's some great shots though in that final sequence, which is
Oh, they are.
I I felt conflicted
Mm-hmm.
watching the final action sequence because I'm like, damn, there's some really great stuff here, but I wish they would have edited this less. Um,
100%. Yes.
but the cinematography in general in the film is great. There's awesome framing and blocking, and there's very evocative shots of just two people sitting across a table from each other because there's a lot of built up tension in this story,
Mm-hmm.
especially between the relationship between Mitchum and Takakura's character, because as we find out, which I'm not going to spoil, there's a much more complicated thing
Yep.
going on between them. And I think that makes the final sequence and their final moments together so impactful
Yes.
and so interesting. I do feel like this film lost me a little bit in the second act because I feel like it gets a little too convoluted plot wise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when it really focuses on the relationship between Mitchum and Takakura's characters, I think this film really thrives because they have such an interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
They have very different motivations and approaches to life. And it is that strange, like, quote unquote, with air quotes, my fingers, like buddy cop kind of situation. It actually does kind of feel a little lethal weapony because Takakura is like the go for broke, like
Yep.
I'm going for a kind of person, and Mitchum kind of is the Murtaugh of the situation. Is like I don't want to die today, kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the I think this is a really well shot film, and I think that dynamic between the two of them is a really compelling through line in this film.
100%. What I really enjoyed and appreciated is the like East meets West or East versus kind of West in a way
Yeah.
where there is a dialogue, there's a scene where so what is this Giri thing, right? And they try to tell him it's like, this is like more than honor. This is like this I cannot remember the exact sentence, but he said something like you have a debt, but it's like a like honor is debt or something like that. And then the guy asks, "So, do you believe in God?" No. So, who is the one who punishes you, or how? So, why do you feel the sense of, accomplishing this giri? Like, what's stopping you from not doing it? And he says, "Well, giri." Right? And it's just that kind of like, that's what I thought this movie did very well was the like West versus East and
Yeah.
how the different mindset, even to this day, is so like, they are on a different length wavelength to most Western people, right? We are also like, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And this is what I really appreciated. These kind of like about honor, what does it mean about pain? Like, like the final scene you hinted at, it's not just about the pain, it's more about like, how do you pay such a debt to somebody who you might have ruined his life not even knowing it, like, in a way. And
Hmm.
it's I really appreciate when the movie focuses, as you said, more on that complexity and more on the story rather than the action. I thought that's where it shined the most.
Hmm. Well, and what's interesting, you brought up a couple of pretty big things that I want to hit on there.
Hmm. Hmm.
One, this actually gave me a little bit more context to appreciate something that happens in the John Wick films.
Mm. Oh
in
yeah.
terms of a finger,
Mm-hmm.
because it is something that has a much deeper meaning and measure of sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
that you're willing to give up. And it was one of those moments where you get that revelation of what really is the relationship between, because like there's this triangle, however you want to frame it, between Mitchum Takakura and the woman that's involved in this triangle.
Yeah,
And
Aiko.
the 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 revelation of what really was going on there gave me one of those, talk about what kind of
Yep.
reactions. I'm like, wait a minute, because like that completely reframes this dynamic and makes this film a lot more tragic.
Yep.
And I really do like Aiko as a character, and that sequence where like reconnecting
Mm-hmm.
between her and Harry's character. But this is, you brought up the East versus West,
Mm-hmm.
and this is something that I hit me personally because I think my perspective on the world is people spend too much time living their lives based off of the consequences set up by some entity they believe in.
Yes.
I personally don't feel like I have to live my life to prove that I can be a good person to something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to live a good life because I want
Yeah.
to prove to myself that I can live a good life. And I have a sense of pride in being a good person and
Mm-hmm.
helping other people out. I don't need an external
You believe in
force.
yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's a very interesting West versus East perspective, because the West really spends a lot of time trying to justify their actions based off of, well, I'm going to be judged someday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're not going to be judged someday. You're being judged right now. Like, you could be a better person because you could be a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very interesting thread that gets opened up by that conversation,
Yep.
because like Harry is stuck in the mud of, but who's going to punish you? It's like, why does it have to be about punishment?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why can't it just be about like you want to live a good life and you want to, like,
Honorable
if
life. Like have
yeah,
an honor.
yes, it's like if somebody does good for you, you should want to do good for them. And to be honest, you should want to do for good for them before they do something good for you. But like at that point, it's like I think it brings up some very interesting themes that resonate in an interesting way. And then on more of a surface level,
Mm-hmm.
just a aesthetic West versus East standpoint, because we are very much in Japan,
Yes.
and you could tell the big difference in terms of dress, because like you do get the traditional Japanese garb, but even their suits and everything
Mm-hmm.
look different, because
Yeah.
like Robert Mitchum is so 70s with that turtleneck blazer combo,
Yep.
which he rocked. I'm a fan of the turtleneck blazer combo. As people who have seen me could probably guess, I have a bit more of a 70s aesthetic, between my mutton chops and my pompadour and stuff like that. But like I appreciated, just from like an aesthetic standpoint, that they really went all in on costuming and production design to make this a very interesting and engaging visual experience too.
No, 100%. Like again, this movie, I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I think it's definitely worth seeing if for nothing else. The camera work, like the it's genuinely beautiful. Also, who I was surprised to see in this movie is an actor called Herb Edelman, aka Hi, it's me, it's Stan from Golden Girls.
I'm so glad that you brought up, I brought up the Girls, because I was going to bring them up
I was
too.
like it took me a second. I was like, this good dude was so familiar, and then like he like thingy. He like bend it like to get his guns or something. And I'm like, oh, it's Stan. Hi, it's me, it's Stan. And I'm like,
So I
oh
knew
yeah, duh.
immediately because I watched Golden Girls so much, and also
Mm,
literally Jess and I binge it every New Year. So I was literally just watching Golden Girls, which
nice.
honestly, I don't think Stan popped up in any of the episodes we watched this year.
Mm,
There was a Stan drought there. He came
yeah,
up
yeah.
because Stan comes up a lot
Yes, he does.
when he's not there. But I thought that was interesting because I think this is the only other thing that I've ever seen him pop up in.
Yep, same.
And also Goro Tanaka,
Hmm.
uh Takakura's the actor who plays Takakura's brother, James Shigeta, is Naka from Die Hard.
Oh yeah,
He's Takagi.
he is. Yes.
So I noticed him, and he's also in Mulan, but just his voice as
Hmm.
General Lee. So like, there's a couple of familiar faces that I appreciated in this. I think this film falters because yes, they over edit the action a bit, and
Hmm.
two, I think the film gets caught in the weeds too much plot wise.
Yeah.
Thematically and overarching narratively, I think this is a really interesting and compelling movie. It is
Hmm.
one of those kinds of films where I'm just like, I think it gets lost in the weeds at times. And but there's great performances. I'm a huge Robert Mitchum fan.
Hmm.
Um, I think it was very interesting seeing him in this because like The Night of the Hunter
Hmm.
is top 100 favorite films for me. I absolutely love that film, and him as Harry Powell, one of the most sinister villains in film,
Hmm.
is very interesting. And he was very much a noir actor. And I think this has like the threads of noir kind of thing, this neo noir Japanese kind of spin
Yep.
on it. And I thought that was very interesting casting, bringing him in on this project. But I do really like him in this. I love the character dynamics. There's a lot of things to really appreciate about this film, and I think this film might grow on me. I think
Hmm.
even just from having this conversation, this has grown on me a little bit too. Um, but I I'm going to watch this again at some point. I am going to get this movie for sure.
For me, actually the same. Like for me, the more I'm removed from it, the more I'm like, there is like even though there is like a lot of like the story is complex and there's an overarching arm, it's also quite a lot like vibe movie where it
Yes.
puts you in that vibe of like a Japan from 70s, where I've never been to Japan even now, let alone 70s. Like I didn't exist in 70s. uh but I felt like I was there with them. Like
Hmm.
there is something about these movies, especially from the 70s, like for me, they know how to put you there. So you feel like you're part of the action. And and I just maybe it's the fact that nowadays movies are not really made on sets. They are made on, stage studios with a blue screen or green screen. So
Hmm.
like, but and they actually spent like I think 10 weeks in Japan. So like
Yeah.
so this it's actually they actually are in Japan, and you can feel it from there. You can so even though I'm not like I still rated it 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd, so I do like it. So I definitely would like to get the Blu-ray of this, and when I'm in a better mood, rewatch it properly, and maybe the complications will be like, oh yeah, I was just a dumbass not paying attention. Maybe that's on me, and quite possibly. But no, again, and it's Sidney Pollack, so like I do need to watch more of his movies. But from what I've seen of his, I love him. Kind of like you, same as an actor. Like many times, I've watched him first time as an actor. So like Tootsie is one of my favorite movies,
Yeah.
and it's just like it's such a like great movie, and he's in it, and he also directed it. So like
Yeah.
it's Sidney Pollack. So like you besides the action, you cannot really go wrong.
Yeah, and Tootsie's great, and
Oh,
he does amazing things with that. I just watched Absence of Malice for the first time recently with Paul Newman in it. I really did enjoy that. Like, it's easy to hate on this particular film, but
Mhm.
I feel like Sidney Pollack's directing gets the most attention for Out of Africa
Yeah.
because like it is Oscar baity. Like I don't like using that term to be honest, but like if anybody's gonna call anything Oscar baity, it's gonna be Out of Africa.
Yes.
Um, or like The English Patient and films like that. But
Hmm.
like he directed 3 Days of the Condor, which is
Great movie.
fantastic. Jeremiah Johnson, which you might never have heard of this film, but you know the the meme and the gif of Robert Redford, who you might not know that it's him in that gif or
Oh yeah,
meme,
yeah.
is
The one where
the
where many
bearded
people
guy who
believe it's
turns around at the lake and just like quietly
and,
nods at you. That's Jeremiah Johnson, and that's Robert Redford.
and many people believe that's Zach Galifianakis because he does look like like I saw
I
somebody like
had
how old were you before when you realized this is not Zach Galifianakis?
I had Netflix DVD service and got Jeremiah Johnson, and I'm sitting
Mhm.
watching this, and that moment happened. I'm like, what?
Yep.
And I had a moment where like I audibly reacted that like one, that's Robert Redford in that meme. Because
Yeah.
like he doesn't look that way
Nope.
ever. But oh my god, I had that moment. But that was directed by Sidney Pollack.
I need to watch that. I still haven't seen it.
Yeah. I have to give it a rewatch. It's been years since I watched Jeremiah Johnson.
Hmm.
But anyway, those are our thoughts on Yakuza. But Luke, thank you as always for coming on and talking movies with me.
Always a blast, Sheen.
And thank all of you for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this episode. What are your experiences with Sidney Pollack? And why do you also love the movie The Firm? Which was one of the nicest $2 I ever spent on a Black Friday buying that DVD at Best Buy.
Nice.
Boy, were those the days when Best Buy sold physical movies. But make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. The SPM Crew Podcasting Network is filled with great content and ever expanding. So we talk about film and television, music and sports and physical media and comics and just talking about life with Luke. But there could be more if you're interested in starting up a podcast. Let us know. And if you like our logo, check out High Flyer Creative for all your digital marketing needs. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Watchlist here on the SPM Crew Podcasting Network.